Hello, everyone. It's top of the hour, and we have our library assistant director, Maud Mundava, and her colleagues today to speak to us. Thank you for joining us today. We're pleased to have you with us for this webinar, and we hope you're excited as we are about the topic we're about to explore. My name is Deb, and I will be hosting this session today. Just a quick reminder, this session is being recorded. And if you need to step away or want to revisit any part of the presentation, the full recording will be available at request. So before we dive into today's discussion, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping points. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to submit them via the chat feature, and we'll be monitoring and answering as many as possible. And if time permits, we'll have a Q&A at the end. So now let's get into the good stuff, and I will hand the keys over to Maud. Thank you for presenting today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Roy, as well as Dr. Jackson, and everyone else who has joined us this afternoon. My name is Maud Mundava, and I'm the Assistant University Library Director, as well as the campus head. I'm located in Kirksville, Missouri. And I'm also here with my colleagues, Sean Rife, who is from Site AI. He will tell you more about that. It's a product that we already have. We are subscribing to it, and it is for faculty, staff, and our students. They'll say more about it. And then Pete Dunning as well is from Site AI. My other colleague, whom I'm not seeing yet, is from the University of Missouri. She's a fellow who has been working very closely, especially with AI, with faculty and students at the University of Missouri. So as she joins us, she will be the last person who will be talking about AI, especially in research and teaching and learning initiatives. So from my point of view, for me, I'm going just to be, I think Pete and Sean, you can introduce yourself later on when you come in. Is that okay? All right, great. So I'll go ahead and just share with you a few things that we are doing in the library. All right. So in the library, we have some initiatives that we have started working on. Some of them, we are just doing it in the library, but we are also trying to find means and ways of especially collaborating across the campus with our faculty, and also maybe with departments like Teaching and Learning Center and even research support, and in any way that we can to support especially our faculty, students, and staff. So one of the tools that we are subscribing to, and you hear more about that, is Site AI Research Assistant. This one, with this product, we started subscribing to it. I think it's almost over a year now. We support citation analysis and research discovery, and it does much more than that, but I will not say much as of now, for my colleagues are here to talk about that. We have Covidence AI, which is especially a great tool, especially with systematic reviews, but the AI component of it assists with systematic reviews by predicting exclusions. Isn't it? You have to go inclusions and excluding. So it helps, I think it smoothens your process in that regards. And if you want to hear more about this, just reach out to your subject liaison. They will be happy to talk to you about that. But I think most of you are already probably using it because it's embedded in that tool. And then Up to Date is our new product also, which has an AI component. It integrates AI into clinical decision support. So as you are maybe doing some research work or you're looking for information within Up to Date, it has an AI sandbox, which can help you with a lot of questions that you may have. But for this one, the last one, you have to let us know so that you can get set up for that, because it's still also in its trial system. So if you just let us know, reach out to your subject liaison, or you can reach out directly to me, but your liaisons are available to help you with that. And then our Still One search, which is your main catalog where you search for those books, for those research articles, which is our Google, right, for our library. That one, we are going to be transitioning to an AI component of it in June 2025. And with that, it will summarize, especially maybe information based on what is written in the abstract. And it will help you to kind of maybe quickly see if this article is the right article for you, but you also still have to critically analyze, because this is just a tool and you have to make sure that is it really representing what you are looking for. So it's a tool that is coming up. We are just letting you know it's something that will be out there. And then scoping review, especially with our, which one is this? This should have been, I think, Scopus. With Scopus, there's also an AI component that you may not be feeling, but as you are doing your searches, it can help you or enhances, especially your searches that you'll be doing with that. I should have put Scopus on that one. And we also have created an AI LibGuide where we've been trying to collect information around campus, what others are doing, especially other fields or other faculty within their different departments and divisions. And we've put a lot of information. This one, I'm going to click it so that maybe you can see what kind of information we have. This could be maybe from other universities as well, and other resources that we have. So guidelines on AI in regards to what is happening in other places. And it also has some policies. I think policing has been another challenge that we've been having, that maybe each department, they're doing their own thing, but there are other universities that are now also trying to set up maybe guidance that can help through across the campus. And I think here we've also set up a task force which is actually working on that as well. And then, of course, I said contact your library liaisons. I know you know them, but I wanted you to see them. They are right here. And if anything that I talked about, you still need some answers or you have questions, please contact any one of them, but you're welcome to also ask me. And we are also, we've just introduced, we are starting AI Show and Share, where we are trying to collect material from different departments to talk about how they're using AI, maybe for teaching or maybe for their own research work. And then we put it in podcast form, and we are going to be sharing that. And this is being done with our library, working together with the IT department. And of course, school program policy collection, we are also doing that. And most of that, we are also putting it on our LibGuide. And I think the task force for the university-wide has just been formed. And most of you, I think you'll be learning more about that. Sorry. I wanted to see what else did I have. And we are looking for input for us to see how best can we support you in your class, in your teaching, in your research work, especially in regards to AI, since it's moving so fast and impacting us in so many different ways. So if there's anything that we can do with you, maybe just send an email to your liaison or to the library director, How Bright, or even myself. But definitely we'll be looking forward to working with you. For now, I want to hand over to Sean and Pete to talk more about Site AI. What is it and how can it support your teaching and learning endeavors at ATSU?
Yeah, thanks, Maud. Hello, everybody. As Maud mentioned, my name is Pete Dunning. I am the account manager, account rep for your organization for Site AI. So I'm just going to quickly say hello, and it's nice to meet everybody. And then I'm going to pass it on to Sean Rife for the training and to answer any of your questions. Sean is actually a university professor, and he is the co-founder of Site. So you probably have the most qualified person in the world to give this talk here for you. So no pressure there, Sean, but I'll pass it over to you.
I was going to say, thanks for setting expectations nice and low for me there, Pete. Yeah, yeah. Thanks for everyone making the time. Really glad to talk to everyone, and gonna just spend 15 minutes, 20 minutes maybe, just sort of discussing the core features of Sight, and delve in a little bit in the process into how to use it in the context of teaching and learning. I'll talk a little bit about just some of the ways that I use some of the features and the way that I've actually integrated it into the classroom, in particular for research methods courses that I teach. So we'll get into that. Hopefully, we'll be directly relevant to all of you. Going to go ahead and share my screen here. Hang on one second.
You mind just to tell us a little bit about you and then which university?
Sure. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So I'm a associate professor of psychology at Murray State University in Kentucky. We're in the southwest part of Kentucky, sort of about 2 hours north of Nashville. And I got my PhD in 2014 from Kent State. My background is in social psychology and sociology, as well as quantitative methods. And I basically met my co-founder Josh Nicholson back in 2016, and then a couple of years later, we formed the company along with 2 other co-founders, and then recently joined the team at Research Solutions. So I've kept my university position because I enjoy it. I enjoy teaching and I enjoy research, and enjoy getting to work with Research Solutions now on site. So. A little bit about me. I have 2 kids and a wife, and a cat. There we go. I think that's all the pertinent details. So yeah, and in fact, actually, I'll just go ahead and say if anyone has any questions, as I'm talking, feel free to just raise your hand on the Zoom or just open the mic and just talk. I'm pretty informal about this. I want it to be as useful as possible. So, can everyone see this? Okay, we good? Good. Okay, cool. So yeah, so when I talk about Sight, I like to really start by focusing on what my co-founder Josh he likes to refer to as the world without Sight, which is sort of the world that we're all used to, that we're all accustomed to, and that is the world of the academic journal article. And we really, we created Sight, and we really rolled out 3 major products. There are a bunch of features, on Sight, and unfortunately, I just don't have time to get into all of them. But I'm going to focus on what I think of as the big 3, kind of in the order that they were developed. So the first thing that we did, when you go to a page like this, you see this is a paper that I wrote as I was finishing up my PhD, and it's just about doing research using Facebook. And Taylor and Francis, they provide all this information, most stuff that we would expect a publisher to provide. But they also do this thing that most publishers do, which is they create this cited by panel here, and all of these papers are papers that that cite my paper, that cite this work. And so if you wanted to know sort of where this particular piece of scholarship sits relevant to all the other papers that have come after it and cited it, if you wanted to do that, you would have to go through each one of these, get the full text, look up the reference, and there you go. And it'll point toward, show you what that paper is saying about this work. That process is actually the very first thing that we introduced at Sight, to automate. So if you pull up the Sight report for that same paper, you'll see a lot of the same information, but what makes Sight unique is what's down here in these white panels. This is actually text that's not from my paper, but instead is actually from papers that are citing my paper. And so, in this instance, we found 102 publications and extracted 66 what we call citation statements. So the citation statement is just the text that surrounds the citation itself. With all of these reports, we have one of these for everything with the DOI, and you can sort and filter them by a number of different fields, like the type of publication or the year that it was published. But you also have the ability to sort and filter by the types of citations it has received. So one thing that we've done from the outset was we have some AI that we basically trained to classify each of these citation statements as one of three types. So for example, this one right here, where we say these results closely parallel those of Rife et al. 2014. That's what we call a supporting citation, because they're indicating that they found something similar. The opposite of that would be what we call a contrasting citation. So, we failed to replicate Rife et al., or, these results are inconsistent with Rife et al. The modal case, the most common type of citation, is what we call a mentioning citation. And, that on here, we have a total of 62. And so we have that data, again, for everything with the DOI. And, I find for my research and my teaching, this is an invaluable resource. Again, I always kind of joke, we created the thing that I wish I'd had in grad school and that I wanted to have now as a faculty member. Just, a few examples of use cases, keeping up with, seminal papers in my area. For any paper in Cite, you can have it basically send you an alert. You click on this little bell up here for the page for that paper. It'll give you an alert, when, for example, a new paper comes out that cites that paper. So that's just good in terms of keeping, abreast of what's, related to important works in your own research. I also use this in the context of teaching. If I'm planning, like, for example, a graduate seminar, and I'm assigning a list of papers for my students to read, I go through there every time I teach, for example, graduate social psychology. And I will, go through there and I'll just go to each one of the article report pages for all the papers that I'm assigning and just see what's happened recently, filtering by year, and just say, all right, who's been citing this paper more recently? Is there, maybe some new contrasting evidence that I need to include that I maybe should assign along with that paper? Just as sort of a check to see that I'm not out of date, and that there's not some major new finding or theoretical, paradigm shifting finding in some area that's outside of my, real core specialization. So that's just a couple of examples of just the way that, that I use this in my own teaching and research. So that's the first major product that Cite released. The next thing that we did was we think of the article reports as sort of an evaluation tool. And so the next step from that was really developing a discovery tool using the same data. So if you go to the search bar anywhere on the Cite website, you can do a simple keyword search, and it will, what we're doing here is we're just doing a search for, beta blockers and hypertension, so a class of drug and a condition that might be treated by that drug. It will, what we're doing right here now is doing a metadata search, which is metadata search simply being leveraging the article metadata, so titles, keywords, and abstracts. And from this, we've got 6,500 results. And with all of this, you can sort and filter by, the topic, by the publication type, the journal that it appears in, the year that it came out. But one unique feature of Cite Search is that because we have access to all of those citation statements, you can actually tell the system to sort and filter by how those papers have been cited. So for example, what I'm doing here is I'm telling the system, hey, only show me search results, of papers that have received at least 14 supporting citations. And so, this is sort of a rough proxy for quality, right? These are going to be papers that, have at least to some extent been replicated, or to have had some part of their findings be replicated subsequently. And that takes us from, a few thousand papers to now we've got, 22. And another thing we can do, because we have access to the full text of articles and to those citation statements, is you can actually have the system search the citation statements themselves. And so that really goes beyond metadata and digs into the actual content of each of the papers. And so, this is actually, really valuable for doing sort of a deeper dive into any given subject. We have, again, there are a bunch of other tools that are sort of built into this, but I want to make sure I have time to stay on the AI tool, which I'll get to in just one second here. We do have a full-on Boolean query builder. We have the ability to export search results. You can get notifications anytime a new search result pops up to a certain term. We have what we call dashboards. Dashboards are just collections of papers, so it's kind of like a reference manager. We have integrations for reference managers like Zotero and Mendeley and EndNote. I'm sorry, not EndNote. EndNote you have to export and import in order to get its data in and out of site. The point being is there's a bunch of stuff that's built around both search and article reports. I really encourage y'all to, if you have time, go through and play around with some of the additional features that I don't have the time to get into today, but you might find really useful. Okay, so those are the first two, article reports and search. The third thing is has quickly become the thing that Cite is most known for. If I'm going to assume on this call, and again, please feel free to speak up if this is not the case. But I'm going to assume that everyone on this call has some familiarity with large language models and AI, not technical familiarity, but just when I say ChatGPT, you know what I'm talking about. Because I'm going to warn you, if you're tired of hearing about this stuff, I'm going to say ChatGPT a few times. ChatGPT is a chat interface with a large language model. It's just a computer system that's been trained to sound human. And if you've played around with ChatGPT, it is undeniably incredibly impressive technology. It definitely gives you the impression you are talking to a human being or some sentient entity, even though you're not. With that said, there are some problems when it comes time to use ChatGPT, GPT, or any other out-of-the-box large language model for real research. And I'm going to highlight two major issues. I'm picking on ChatGPT. This applies to other out-of-the-box large language models as well, but I'm going to pick on ChatGPT because it's the big one. The first problem is that sometimes ChatGPT will lie to you. Maybe lie is too strong a word. It will say things that are not true. I said it sounds human. Sometimes it's a bit too human because, fun fact, sometimes human beings will say things that are not true. So sometimes ChatGPT can be a little bit too human. It'll give you false information. And to make matters worse, it'll actually give you sometimes fake references. So it will say, read this book by Smith and Jones from 2017 on the history of hypertension, and you'll look for this book. It's got to be out here somewhere. Who are these people again? Where is it? You spend 50 minutes looking for it, can't find it. That's because it doesn't exist. The large language model, what's called hallucinated that reference. So it just made it up. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is related to timeliness. So any large language model only understands the data it was trained on, the way the world looked when it was created. Unlike you and me, who are constantly going through our lives, we turn on the news, we have conversations with people, we learn new things and integrate that with our understanding of the world. Large language models don't do that. They are trained on a set of data, basically a whole bunch of text from the internet, and they learn all that, and then they're done. So if you train your large language model in January, something happens in February, now it's March, and you ask your large language model about the thing that happened in in February, it just doesn't know. It doesn't know that that's a thing. So what we've done with Cite Assistant is we've actually broken apart the reading and writing part of the task from the research task. I can't talk and type at the same time. So you can ask Cite Assistant a question that is relevant to research. And the first thing it will do is it will use GPT, will use that same technology to read the question and figure out what I'm asking. It will then, again, using that same GPT technology, it will develop some search terms. It'll say, okay, here's some things that we need to search for in order to get an answer to this question. Now, critically, what it's doing here is it's using Cite's data, our collection of documents, to answer that question. It is not relying on the large language model or the word embeddings, if you know the technical term here, of the large language model, to answer the question. It's using cites data. And it's going to run these searches, and it's going to, pour through these millions of findings. You can see all these searches that we ran, 23 million for one of these. It's going to go through all of these, and it's going to identify a subset of those papers in cite that it has decided are relevant to the question that's being asked. Again, using the same large language model technology, it's going to read them. So in this case, we have 57 publications. It's going to, I'll put that in scare quotes, read those papers. And then it's going to, again, using that GPT technology, it's going to compose a response. But when it composes the response, the factual statements that it gives are going to be based on what it found in CITE's data set, not what comes out of the large language model. So as a result, we can do a bunch of cool things with this output that it's created. So, every time it cites a paper, that paper will be underlined, and you can hover over that citation, and it will actually show you a link to the cite report for that paper, a link to the full text for that paper, and it will show you the text that it pulled out of that paper that it's using to back up the statement that it just made. So it's saying, here's the thing that I found that backs up what's in this paragraph. And so, I used to say when we first launched this that you can be guaranteed there are none of those hallucinations, no fake references. And then somebody said, no, I think we found one, and I since have seen it happen once. I think we fixed that actually, and it's no longer an issue, but I'm now a bit more conservative, and I just say, look, you can be 99.9% sure that it's not going to make up any references. And if it does, it should be really obvious because it won't have an underline on it. But I've not seen that happen in years. I think we've basically fixed that issue. I use this, in a ton of ways. I think I believe Pete mentioned, you were interested in the prospect of using this to, for example, write grant proposals. Yes, 100%, and that is one of the key use cases. So I mean, some combination. I kind of go into my philosophy on this is because I use this in the classroom. I use it in my own writing, but I sort of practice this notion of if you're going to use one of these tools, you need to tell people that you're using them. And I tell my students that too. My students, I teach them how to use Site Assistant. They all get free access because I'm their professor. And so I teach them how to use it effectively. Do things like I teach them to go through and look at the articles that it's citing, pull up that first source material. If you're using the text that it creates, use that as a first draft. But go back there and after you've done some reading, you should go back there and you should want to be, if you're reading critically, you should want to be able to edit what Site Assistant has done and make it more in tune with what your project is about, right? So I think it's great for composing reading lists. It's great for composing first drafts or getting summaries of areas of research. One of my favorite stories. I know I don't want to run too much over in time. I don't want to make sure we have time for Q&A. But one of my favorite stories about this is I had an undergraduate who had this really interesting idea for a study for his research project, and it was a great idea, but I didn't know that area of research. And so I didn't know what terms to use. I didn't know, what to search for. And so I just went into Assistant and I just described the method that he had described to me that he had come up with. And I said, are there any studies that employ this technique? And it came up with a list of like 12 different studies that I don't know I would have ever found. If I, and also critically, it also gave, in the response, gave me keywords, that were related because I could say, okay, here's the language that people are using when they're doing research in this area. And that was, became that student's sort of, first draft of his project was what was on that reading list. So, it's really effective in the sense that you can ask it really interesting questions and have it generate, text that summarizes stuff from scholarly research, not just in the context of for example, writing a grant proposal, but writing, I think a paper, or any kind of summary like that. I think it's a very powerful tool. You just have to go, you have to be patient, and you have to realize that you can't just ask it to generate some text, and then you're done. That's sort of the ethical caveat that I always make, is that you need to understand that this is a tool for helping you to find information and to compose text and to get answers to questions. But it's not a replacement for actually, for what goes along with thinking about a grant proposal or a research paper, and sort of the human element of thought and creativity that goes into it. So I think Pete said we're at around somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes, and I want to make sure that we have time for questions. So I'm happy to demonstrate other stuff. There are other settings in Assistant that you can tweak, and you can do any kind of prompt engineering you want with Assistant. But I know that I saw people in chat, so it looks like there may be some questions. So I'll go ahead and just jump in there, or whoever wants to open their mic and talk. I'm happy to hear questions as well. So,
well, I would suggest that we have Ms. Moeller present her thoughts on this topic, because we need to have that. We need to have like 20 minutes of her thoughts being presented here, and then we'll open up the mic to questions. There's been one comment about the concern you pointed out, Dr. Rife, about ChatGPT. So we'll talk about it, because that is very important to us.
of course.
If that's okay with you. So, Ms. Mueller, would you be okay to go now? And then, yeah.
Yes, so thank you for inviting me. I'm here on the invitation of Maud, and I work at the University of Missouri Libraries. I'm a social sciences and instructional services librarian, and I'm also the university's AI faculty fellow. And so I was asked to talk a little bit about the practical applications of AI, but also ethical considerations as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here, and I've got just a basic slide deck we'll go through, and then a few pieces to talk about as well. So first of all, tools. There are a lot of them out there, right? And they have a variety of applications. This is kind of how I like to group them. It's the way that I make meaning out of the many, 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 many ones that I'm playing around with, and also trying to keep track of the passwords for. I do think that I'll be talking more about the searching and the literature review piece more than, say, the creative and the writing pieces today. But I just wanted to share a list of a few that I thought were fun, and we'll come back to this later. But really, the important part is, where does the human come in? Where is the human in the loop? And I think that this really matters, because it's easy to say like, oh, well, AI is able to do so much for us. As Sean just showed us, it can do a lot of the researching process. It can help generate parts of an outline. So what's included, what's missing, and where does the human need to be in the loop? It's really important to know what's included. Most AI tools are pulling from Semantic Scholar, which is an open access database, and it includes some full text, and then it includes a lot of abstracts. So for the most part, it's scraping abstracts, and the content that you're gaining when you use AI tools like Elicit or Perplexity or SciSpace really are just working with the content that's in the abstracts. So it's a great starting point, but it doesn't give you the full perspective of what is actually discussed in the article. AI also is geared toward giving you an answer. It wants to give you the answer that it thinks you're looking for. So your prompt is really going to influence what you come out with at the end. And prompt engineering really matters, because again, it's trying to figure out what you're asking, and it's going to give you an answer, even if that answer isn't right, based on what you've asked. It is really good at finding patterns as well, though. So for things like a systematic review, different tools can be helpful. So what's missing? Articles behind paywalls. This is what your libraries are good for. But unless you have a tool that's integrated through your proxy server, again, it's only picking up those abstracts. And it can be an echo chamber. So if you start with your conclusion, you say, okay, I know what my paper is going to be. I'm going to start writing, and I'm going to let AI fill in the citations. It's that same idea that we see with our students, where we say, do your research first and then do your writing. Don't do your writing and then try to find something to fit. It just doesn't work. I'm sure we all have examples of students who have tried to go that direction and favorite stories. So what do we need to do? We need to engage with the articles themselves, make sure that we know, okay, if a tool we're using makes a statement and uses a citation, if we look at that citation, is it accurate? So like Sean mentioned, was it a hallucination? Is it real? That's not as much of an issue as it used to be. It's gotten a lot better in the last year, and it's getting better all the time, frankly. So I think we'll be at a point at some point where most of the citations we see actually exist in the world. That doesn't mean it actually says what's being claimed, though. So actually looking at the article, jumping to the conclusion, that piece that's not actually included in the abstract, but the new meaning, the new understanding that comes is a big part of it. And then most of the AIs that I've come across don't do a great job of engaging text with each other. They'll kind of list out like, oh, we looked at the top 20 articles that we thought were relevant, but then it'll list 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it doesn't have like, oh, well, 1, 5, and 7 all are bringing this particular aspect together. Some tools do a bit better of a job with that. I know Cite does a pretty decent job, but there's definitely a lot that's missed still in those pieces. And then inaccuracies. This is not new information. We know that most AI tools are trained on human content, and human content has biases. There's a lot of reports recently about tech companies that have used AI to look at resumes, and the human in the loop realized that no women were getting pulled into the resume pool because the AI had determined from stereotypes it found online that women weren't going to be in technology or in that field. And so that's a very obvious example, but it is important to say, okay, well, I know my field of research. So when I look at this, what isn't being pulled? What's really not quite making it into the story? So fact checking, checking those biases, and checking the gaps to see what's not being included. And just as a couple quick examples, I threw a few tools together. SciSpace. This is kind of what I mentioned before, where it gives you the articles, but it kind of breaks them out individually and the sources that it's using individually. Elicit does the same thing. It'll say article A says one thing, article B says another. And you can tell pretty quickly when I love the column aspect. Like, this is great for data extraction, right? But if you put in something like number of participants, and you say, okay, I want that to be a column, it pretty quickly lets you know, oh, well, that wasn't mentioned. The abstract doesn't say it. The abstract doesn't say it. Sometimes the abstract does, but not always. And I do want to share it. So this past week or two, most tools have added an extra piece, right? So there's this new deep research piece. So SciSpace calls it deep review. Elicit calls it a research report. And the paid version of ChatGPT has one of these as well that generate a research report. And I did one of these, and they take a little while. They usually take like 8 minutes. So I ran one ahead of time. And let's see if it pulls it up. There we go. And it has the same problem. So interestingly enough, it will give you the table. And when you're looking through the table, it gives you that little asterisk and it'll show where it's pulling that information from. But if you go to the far side of the table, it'll disclose whether or not the full text was retrieved. And in this particular case, I'm not paying for Elicit on this review. We do have a couple of different versions at the University of Missouri, but for the free version, it pulled 10 out of the top 100. And if you pay for it, I think it does 25 out of the top 200. But you can see only one of those articles it actually had access to looking at. Interestingly enough, so I'm doing this as a project that I've written on before. I know a fair amount about it. I've written a couple systematic reviews on this topic. I looked into the methodology of how did it decide these 10 were the ones to choose. And it gives me this list. Okay, we looked at age range, we looked at all of these different pieces, and then it says outcome measures was one of the pieces. But if you, and that, study designs were these things. But when you actually look at the table itself, again, back down to this table, about half of these are systematic reviews or meta-analyses, which don't have outcome measures. So it's really kind of an interesting piece to see that, yes, it does give a little bit more information. The report was actually quite fascinating to read. It goes through a thematic analysis of the different types of interventions, which is really helpful for someone who would just be starting this topic. It gives me some papers that I probably want to look at. Systematic reviews are a great way to dig into a topic and to learn more about it and to get that big picture rather than just looking at maybe a single case study. But the report itself, again, it's like that. It's not necessarily something that I would put that statistic in a paper that I myself am writing and that I would trust full-heartedly. So just again, keep in mind that where the information is coming from matters. What's included matters, and it does change the results that you get. Okay, so how do you get better results? Part of it is saying, okay, no, you just have to look at the articles. Part of it is prompt engineering. And a lot of this framework actually came from a Google course on AI prompt engineering. I think it's pretty useful. But I think that it's important to try at least to give the basic overview anytime you're doing a prompt. The first is the task. What do you want the AI to be accomplishing? So you could say, hey, I want to get an outline for the topics I should consider when I'm writing about mental health interventions for incarcerated youth. Or you might say, my partner's birthday is coming up and I would like help getting a present. Great task. The task really can be improved if you give the AI a persona. I know that sounds weird, but it has a better output if you give the AI a persona. You are a research expert on the topic of mental health interventions, specifically for youth. You work with youth in K through 12 settings. What would your recommendations be if I was exploring this topic? My partner likes mountain biking. You are a mountain biking professional. What would you recommend is the best safety equipment? So giving it a persona really helps. The format of output helps as well. This isn't as true for the research tools. Like Elicit, it's going to give you the table or it's going to give you the research report. But for generative AI, things like ChatGPT or Claude, saying you want a different format than just a block of text is an option. You can say, hey, for ChatGPT, give me a table where you include 10 articles that I should consider. Again, you're a research expert, give me 10 articles I should consider in a table format with the detail about why it's relevant. So you can have that format. Part 2 is context. The more context you provide, the better the output. I am specifically looking at these ages. I am specifically looking at this setting. I am specifically looking at the United States, perhaps. Or for that birthday example, I am specifically looking for protective gear, I guess. References, if you give it an example or two, that also improves the output. So, okay, for this particular topic, I would expect to see papers along the lines of Dr. Given's work or Dr. Terrence. And for the birthday example, just because, again, I think it's fun to have one that's academic and one that's not, previous favorite gifts included a downhill mountain bike helmet, something along those lines. And then 4, evaluate. Evaluate, evaluate. Again, make sure that the references or what's coming out actually is accurate. Check it for bias, check it to see if it has hallucinations, check it to see if it's actually about what you're trying to find. And all of the examples that I very, very briefly, quickly skimmed through earlier, Elicit, SciSpace, I did look at Cite as well, all of them miss the key part with mental health interventions for incarcerated youth, which is that it doesn't really exist, that there are interventions out there, but for the most part, I think 4% in our United States populations in incarcerated settings actually get the treatment that they have or that they're diagnosed for. So that doesn't come up in any of the reports, in any of the deep research, in any of the basics. It'll tell you like, hey, here's some therapies, here's some options, these are the most effective. But what it doesn't say is it actually doesn't exist. So evaluate and see like, okay, well, what are the pieces that I know are missing? And then reiterate, go back in and say, this is great. I like to thank the AI and tell it it's doing a good job just in case. This is great, but could you also include, or, does it seem like maybe you're leaning a little bit toward this direction? Could you reframe? So that's an option. When you're reiterating, you might go through these prompts again and again and again. But also separating it into shorter sentences seems to be more helpful rather than word vomiting, just like we do in conversation sometimes. It's better to break it into shorter, simpler sentences. So you're an expert and here's some references and I would like this task to be accomplished. So giving it very specific phrasing. You can try different phrasing to make it more compelling. For example, asking it to describe, asking it to make it energetic or entertaining. You can ask it to do a little bit more. And then prompt changing. Prompt changing lets you interconnect the different prompts. So if you've gone and you've reiterated and you've asked a couple times, then you can say, hey, bring this all together, combine the last 5 outputs and give me a final product that you think would be the most impactful. So that's kind of the general prompt engineering. From that point on, I think it's important to talk about ethics too. We do have a lot of tools out there. It's fun to play with them, but there's a lot of different pieces to take into consideration. I'm actually going to start with environmental impact. You'll notice these slides don't have a lot of images. And I think that's unusual for an AI presentation. Usually folks use AI to create fun images to stick in their presentations. But image creation actually uses a ton of energy. And this matters, right? So environmental impact, we know that data centers for AI. In 2023, we don't have the data for 2024 yet, but for 2023, the electric consumption of data centers for AI was the 11th largest energy consumer in the world. It was right between the countries of France and Saudi Arabia. For 2025, we're on track for AI to be the 5th largest electric consumer between Japan and Russia. So it is a huge energy consumer. It's also a huge water consumer. Water is used to cool data centers down, and it is purified water. It's the same water that we use for drinking. And it's already starting to cause huge water shortages in some areas. Uruguay and Chile right now are having protests about new data centers that are planned to go in because it'll be direct competition for the drinking water for the towns it's near. And Oregon, I'm going to get the town in Oregon wrong, but Dallas, Oregon, I think, sued Google this past year because the 3 data centers that Google had for AI were chewing up a ton of water, and Google wouldn't release how much it was using. That lawsuit was successful, and it was determined that Google was using 1/4 of the city's water supply just for those AI data centers. So this does have an environmental impact. I'm a librarian, so I have to talk about copyright. Material that is behind a paywall at our university libraries, for example, is copyright. And so adding that into an AI tool like ChatPDF is really appealing, but also is something we need to be cautious of. Because if you upload it into the public domain, it is a violation of copyright. Do I think most vendors are going to go after individuals? No, but there are already a couple lawsuits where they are going after universities for what they consider to be known use of uploading copyright materials. It also matters for your own data. If you are working on a project and you have data that hasn't been published yet, I would hesitate to put it in a Gen AI model that is open. Free isn't free. Your data is teaching the learning models and is being used and then can be spat back out again. So that's a piece of it. I also just want to highlight privacy. Our university, and yours maybe too, just had a big freak out about Grammarly because different AI tools scrape different amounts of data. Again, free isn't free. So the free issue for Grammarly, or the free version of Grammarly, when you've got the little web browser extension, scrapes everything that's open currently on your computer as context so that it can help edit, which means that if you're editing an email and Grammarly pops up, but you've got a Word document in the background, or perhaps a browser with your bank account information open, Grammarly is capturing all of that and has it all. So it doesn't matter if Grammarly is open in the browser. If it's open in your email and you have a browser window open, it captures that. And that's just one example. A lot of the browser extension tools that you see for AI will do this. They are scraping and grabbing your data at the same time. So it's something to be aware of. I think we're mostly familiar with the idea like, oh, don't put your personal information in AI, don't put necessarily your banking information, but it might not necessarily be realized that it's a wider collection issue. And I do want to say, just in a university setting, our students' privacy also matters incredibly. So this includes, is it tempting to have someone write a letter of or AI write a letter of recommendation? Sure. Should we do that? No. Getting ideas for a letter of recommendation, yes. Getting some draft language, sure, but not the student's personal information. And I think that that's also important when we talk about grading our students' work with AI. Do we have their permission to include their materials and to share it in that regard and in that way? And finally, personal responsibility. This goes along with everything we've talked about before and some of the things Sean mentioned. Is the material that you're looking at and that you're using and that you're putting your name to accurate? Make sure that when you put your name to something, it's something that you believe in, that you know for a fact is true and is good. So checklist for responsible AI use. I think that this is kind of my own personal little checklist, but evaluate suitability. Is it the best tool for the task? Sometimes that answer is yes. Oftentimes that answer might be yes. Ensure approval. So is the journal that you're submitting to really strict about what regulations it has for AI use? Some journals are, some aren't, but check approval. Same thing if you are teaching a class for your syllabus, make sure your students know what your approval level is. Is it, yes, great, let's use this tool, let's talk about it. Is it, yes, some, here's the tools I would expect you to use. So both make sure when you're using it that you have approval, but also make sure that you're clear to the people that you're working with what that case is as well. Consider sustainability. Again, is it the best tool for the job? Protect privacy, your own and everyone else's that you're working with. Protect your own data privacy. validate those outputs, make sure they're accurate, make sure they're real, be transparent and be honest. I think it's really important that when we're working with students, we're honest about what we use AI for as well. And so it's not just them feeling shame about using it, because let's face it, we're using it too. It's exciting, it's new, there are a lot of great opportunities. And then be aware of where the human needs to be in the loop, and double checking those biases and double checking the output and figuring out where the gaps are and what's not being covered, and all of those editorial pieces as well. Okay, and then a lot of opportunities. This is just like me brainstorming things that I think are fun to do with AI. I really like using Claude to, Claude has an option where you can say, create me an interactive test, for example. And so you can use it to create practice tests and quizzes, which I think is fun. So that's that first one on there. So there are a lot of really neat tools that are out there. That's an example of one of them. And then wrapped it up with questions. I will stop sharing. Thank you for the time. I think I just hit my time marker as well. And I'll open it up for anyone else who wants to share or ask.
Well, thank you. That was amazing. Yes, please, Dr. Rife, please go
No, I
ahead.
just really quickly just wanted to thank you, Kimberly. I really appreciate everything. I think we're in broad agreement on most things, so that's great, and I really appreciated everything you said. The one thing that I did want to note was that one of the things that's different about Site, just because y'all do have a subscription, we actually do have access to the full text of articles. So we have, basically all the open access, but we also have indexing agreements with publishers. They will send us all of their back catalog as well as on ongoing deposit of new papers. So that is one advantage just of the Site product, is not to say that you shouldn't still do all the things that Kimberly was talking about in terms of due diligence and all that, but it is an advantage of us over some others that don't have that same level of access. And now I'll shut up and go for questions.
There are two comments, both from Dr. Freeman. And one was, well, it was addressed to you, Sean. You're exploring an issue related to the use of AI that is concerning, the unchecked reliance on large language models to provide accurate feedback about or to help inform a clinical evaluation and diagnosis for a patient. So I think the basic understanding we need is, how reliable is it? Like, is it ready to be unleashed? And can it be calculated into decision making?
I mean, and actually, I would be interested in getting Kimberly's thoughts on this as well. I think, my short answer for that is, in the most extreme form that I think he's giving here, the answer is no. The technology is not ready to become my doctor, right? Dr. Ford needs to see me and needs to talk to me, and then probably she needs to go look some stuff up too, because that's what you have to do, and so I think what you're going to see is going to be, right now that looking up is done on UpToDate, or, and I'm not sure to what extent AI is integrated in UpToDate. But, that sort of, it used to be you would go to a, clinical manual, or there would be reference guides and stuff like that. I think what we're going to see is, just as the technology gets better and better, it will become more ingrained in that process. Of when my doctor leaves the doctor's office and says, hey, I'm going to have to go look into that, they're going to use AI to do it, and hopefully it's going to be way easier and faster and still mediated by my physician. At least that's my sort of vision for it.
I'd agree with that completely. I think that, again, it's where does the human belong in the loop? And I think the actual diagnosis needs to be done by a human, because large language models go with the most likely case scenario. And sure, in a doctor's office, there are going to be most likely case scenarios. 9 times out of 10, maybe the diagnosis is the same, but that 10th time you need to be able to say, well, this isn't the common option. And tools like Cite, while they're great at saying, let's look at the most cited materials, let's look at the most used materials, it limits your ability to see, like, hey, here's this brand new thing, or this thing that hasn't been cited much, because it's such a narrow and unuseful piece to everyone except that one doctor who's an expert in it, right? And so you get, and I think what we saw from my illicit example is, you get a lot of systematic reviews, you get a lot of things that are cited frequently and that are used frequently. And so again, you get that bigger picture, and you get the most common materials to show up, but you don't get the nuance and the detail. And the nuance and the detail, especially when you're looking at medical diagnoses, can really matter and be really important.
course, all this could change in 10 years from now, and I could have a completely different position.
And AI
I
does
think
a really good job at reading scans. So for like reading X-rays and MRIs and things, again, it's the new. You still want the human in the loop to see, okay, well, yes, it noticed the big thing here on the scan, but it missed the little thing over there because it was focused on this piece. But it does a really good job at taking models into account. And so if it's something that can be modeled, like here's 20 MRI images and they all show this, then the next time it sees that same like broken tibia, it knows, oh, here's a broken tibia. So it does read scans really well.
Well, the next comment was also on those lines. It was like we talked about the profession of medicine, but he was like talking about the profession of teaching and professorship. Will AI take it over?
So I actually just went to an AI summit at the University of Florida, and this was a large point of contention at that summit. What does teaching look like in the age of AI? What do assignments look like? And I think the idea is that our teaching has to change, and it should have maybe been changing for a long time. Assigning an end of semester term paper with no feedback, with just that one artifact at the end of the semester has never really been a great model of education. It works for some, but it doesn't necessarily work across the board. And we want our students to be continually learning and revising and having feedback and having engagement, active learning in the classroom, for example. So I think AI gives us a lot of benefits for flipping classrooms and for having practice exams and tutors and assistance with writing. But there's still that need for critical thinking. There's still that need for learning the nuance and the detail. So our teaching just has to adapt, and our assignments have to adapt to be more personal, which maybe they should be even without AI.
Any other questions? You can unmute yourself at any point in time and jump in.
I just say I'm in violent agreement with everything that Kimberly just said. That 100%. You have to change the way you teach. It's just I've gotten rid of I've redone all of my writing assignments. Anything that involves out of class writing is term papers are probably I've already killed off almost all of one of them. So it's just you adapt to the circumstances. So.
And it is scary how easy it is for tools like ChatGPT to take quizzes and exams on we use Canvas, and ChatGPT can look at your screen on Canvas and it can tell you which answer is correct for a multiple choice question. It can write an essay question. So like even those things, it does have to have a change. John asked, what do you do in lieu of term papers? One of my favorite examples is there's a Shakespearean professor here who uses AI to write a paper about Shakespeare and then gives it to the students, and their assignment is to find the mistakes. So in his opinion, and I tend to agree, they have to actually know the material really well to be able to catch the mistakes. And sometimes they're big. He's got a couple big glaringly obvious ones that, it'll say, oh, well, Romeo and Juliet happened in Venice. But then there's some where it's more just like about theme or and they have to catch a certain number of them. So there's different ways. For some classes, of course, the presentation, it's hard to fake a presentation. This doesn't work with huge classes, of course. And so then having more discussion groups in person, when you're in person, breaking people up into groups and having those moderated discussions on a smaller scale. Yeah, that in-person interaction during class time. There are a lot of great examples. I kind of like seeing them all, but lots of options in lieu of term papers. Or free writing in class. One of my colleagues, Christy Goldsmith, she's head of the campus writing program, but she also teaches in the College of Education. She teaches writing, and they do a lot of writing. And so there's a lot of writing in class that builds up to a cumulative paper, but there's constant feedback that's happening during the class time. So they're supposed to write outside of it and then edit and feedback and do that continually, both in and out of the class.
This is actually how I teach my Methods 2 classes. We do almost all the writing is done in class in a computer lab, and I go up and I help them, formulate stuff. I think it works better that way for a lot of reasons. So.
I have one question. Can this tool be used to teach critical thinking?
So in terms of, I guess, what do you mean by teach critical thinking? I guess,
Think out of the box. not accept the paradigm and, form your own opinion.
Right. So, one exercise that I like to show my students as I'm introducing them to this technology is I'll take one of the students' questions or research ideas, and I'll do a question related to that, and then I'll take it and I'll reformulate it and I'll ask it a slightly different way. And usually, what I'll end up doing is I'll end up highlighting. You notice what it said up here was completely different than the thing that it said down here, right? So what do you need to do? And the answer is always, well, you need to go look at the papers that it cited and maybe go find some of them to read and evaluate. I mean, I think it can be, if it's used properly, it can be a really valuable tool for locating information and encouraging, critical thinking. It's just a question of how you're implementing it and whether or not you're responding to the fact that this thing exists.
I think evaluating the output is, I mean, it's just what Sean said. It's evaluating the output. So the examples that I shared earlier, what's missing? A big piece of the conversation is missing. Or, if you're looking at the report, the fact that it's mostly systematic reviews, the fact that it doesn't. So yeah, taking a look at the output and analyzing it.
Dr. Feck has another question. Thoughts on learning assessments for asynchronous online courses that span 10 weeks? We do use discussion threads and have student presentations.
So I'll admit that I am not a fan of the discussion board. I understand with an asynchronous class, having the discussion is important, but I really like tools that let you have that conversation in the PDF. There are a few of them. I think our campus uses Hypothesis. It's hypoth.is, but there's a bunch of them out there that let you have that discussion in the document itself. And so the students, instead of like responding to a thread here or a thread there, and so they're not seeing all of it's happening in the same document, in the same PDF. And so then as an instructor, you can go in, social annotation, exactly. As an instructor, you can go in and see, well, where are there a lot of questions? What should I cover in class? Maybe that they're not understanding, or, are they actually back and forth coming to the conclusion together? So that's one. It's not really an assessment, though. I think that's more the discussion piece. Student presentation, certainly as assessment. I've had different instructors that will have their students create videos of themselves talking about what they've learned. There's a variety of options. And I don't think a paper is necessarily bad, but I think it has to be an iterative process that builds. It can't just be, here's the end of semester deadline that I forgot about until the night before. Now I'm panicking and turning to a tool that will do it for me.
Yeah, I would just building off of that really quickly. So I've come up with some out of class writing assignments. I'm not teaching in the asynchronous online classes presently, but just examples. I've come up. There are ways you can ask like homework questions, or that are formulated in such a way that they're just not amenable to using an AI to answer the question. So like I teach a course on psychology and current events. It's a senior seminar, and the first assignment they have is it's anonymized, and they have to tell me their most controversial opinion. Now, could a student use ChatGPT to come up with a controversial? Sure, but is it really worth it to do that when you can just type out in a few sentences what your most controversial opinion is, and you're done? So, you can make questions that are difficult to properly prompt engineer, or more work to do that, or, questions, and I think we, as professors, we should always be doing this, questions or assignments that are to at least some extent intrinsically interesting or personally relevant. And there's just no reason to use AI for that. And you can build critical thinking into those exercises as well. And I think an online class would be a great example. I'm also not a fan of the discussion board, and I have done that in the past, but I am not doing them anymore. So,
and I think just one other piece to add to that is the idea of what do we want our students to get out of the class. If it's a writing course, then certainly, yes, writing is a piece of it. But if it's not a writing course, what is the goal? And the goal isn't necessarily that we're judging their writing. The goal is to see if they've actually learned the material that we're covering, and what's the best way to do that. Sometimes maybe sure it's a paper, but there are a lot of other ways to see, okay, have they picked up and have they learned the information that we're hoping to convey? And there's a lot of research starting to come out that shows when students use AI research tools like Cite or like Elicit, they actually do still learn the material almost better than if they go through and create a complicated search string on the library's webpage. that breaks my heart a little bit. I'm a fan of the Boolean search, but if it's not necessary and if they're still learning the content and gaining the information that they need, then that's the point.
And so there are a couple of comments. Dr. Kumar pointed out that teaching and assessing critical thinking becomes an even more important, very important in the age of intelligence. That's something that we kind of like deal with every day, right? We have to have our future practitioners be critical thinkers. Thank you for giving us strategies, and also Dr. Fick thanks you. He also used recorded video interviews with healthcare leaders, so to teach. Any other questions from the audience? If you need an account, please reach out to Maud, and she has also provided the link to the library site where you can ask for it. It's on the chat, so please take a look. Oh, thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you Sean and Kimberly for the wonderful presentation. And for Maud for electing to get a site, which is so exciting. I hope this will help all our faculty and probably eventually students, perhaps. Thank you for your insights, Kimberly. That's very helpful, especially the handy dandy list of. Absolutely, the checklist is really, really important for us to keep in mind while using AI.